Gabrielle Giffords, Congresswoman from Arizona, aboard the Endeavour next month. We'll leave this live coverage from NASA and take you live now to the U.S. House. They're coming in for debate on two bills to eliminate homeowner mortgage assistance programs. Debates this afternoon and votes at about 2:30. Live coverage of the House now on C-SPAN.
Ask unanimous consent that the resolution be considered as read and printed in the record.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the proceedings had during the recess be printed in the record.
Without objection, that will be the order. The chair will now entertain requests for one-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, this country has never had an energy strategy. And the only thing worse than not having an energy strategy is having an energy policy that's actually hurting our country, hurting American energy production and American workers, and making us more dependent on foreign oil. That's what the Obama administration is doing right now. Let's review the record. A moratorium on drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, hurting American energy production. A budget proposal that offers $50 billion in new taxes on independent small energy companies working throughout the United States. Also, tax policy that's going to hurt large U.S. companies trying to compete for limited reserves around the world to meet U.S. energy needs. And finally, an attack on horizontal drilling, because we have now found large reserves of oil and gas in our shale formations, and this administration is looking to shut all of that down. And then they come forward because the price of oil at $105 a barrel today, they now want to open up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is supposed to be used in severe shortages. That's not an energy policy. That actually hurts our country. It's time to stop these wrong-headed policies that are hurting American energy production and hurting American workers. I yield back.
Gentleman from Minnesota, for what purpose do you rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Speaker. You'll get no argument in this House that this is a country got to get a handle on our budget, be fiscally responsible, reduce our national debt, and grow the economy. We owe nothing less to our children and grandchildren. But I'll be honest, I'm pretty shocked by the lack of business sense, if you will, from some of my Republican colleagues. What my small businesses know in southern Minnesota, that in addition to tightening their belts and getting efficiencies out of their business, they've got to make smart investments for tomorrow. So last week, what did we do? We cut 41% of the NIH budget to research to the Mayo Clinic in my district that will lay off 68 researchers who equate into billions of dollars of medical research. Republicans also wanted in cutting education. As a high school teacher, I can tell you, where are the workers of tomorrow going to come from and how are they going to compete to be the great innovators to win tomorrow? We did all that at the same time protecting oil subsidies to the CEOs of the largest oil companies who made hundreds of billions. We've got to be smart with taxpayer dollars, and we've got to find ways to think like small, innovative businesses and places like the Mayo Clinic. Save money. Be efficient with our resources. Invest in tomorrow to create jobs. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, gasoline is nearly $4 a gallon. Meanwhile, the administration seems to have a deliberate crusade against the U.S. energy industry and domestic energy independence. Even before Stephen Chu became Energy Secretary, he said, quote, "Somehow we have to figure out a way to boost the price of gasoline to the levels in Europe." Well, that plan is working. The administration is stonewalling the safe development of a Canadian pipeline to my district in southeast Texas that will send crude oil and jobs to American refineries. The administration is using the out-of-control EPA to implement questionable scientific regulations that hammer domestic energy capability. This includes the expensive regulations of CO2 and the EPA attempt to defy the will of Congress by implementing cap-and-trade regulations. The offshore drilling moratorium by the administration is nonsense. A court ordered the moratorium lifted. Now that same court has held the administration in contempt for not, in fact, lifting that moratorium. Each of these are evidence that the administration is at war with domestic energy and the will of the American people. Meanwhile, gasoline prices are getting near those that are in Europe, and that's just the way it is. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As oil and gas prices continue to rise, American consumers and businesses are facing sticker shock at the pump. The national average is $3.49, and the average in New York's capital region that I represent is $3.69. And yet, rather than take action to bring immediate gas price relief or create incentives to invest in clean energy alternatives that create jobs and grow our national security, the Republican budget would maintain our addiction to foreign oil. The Republican spending bill ignores energy efficiency, it ignores clean energy, advanced vehicle technologies, and loan guarantees. What does it leave in place, though? Billions of dollars in subsidies for big oil companies that they have claimed they don't need, especially as they make record profits. And what do we get by throwing billions of hard-earned taxpayer dollars at these big oil companies? Less money in our pockets to get to work and around town. Americans are better than the gasoline we put in our vehicles, and it's time we wake up and realize it and advance research and development. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today is a very special day for not only me, but many people who live in Dallas, Texas, because today is Ebby Holliday's 100th birthday. I've known Ebby for 22 years. This incredibly successful woman is one of the most generous and hardworking individuals I've ever known. Ebby has been an entrepreneur beginning her career selling hats, and today she is the driving force for change in the real estate industry and a household name all across North Texas. Ebby's incredible story is the embodiment of America's dream. Her dedication, work ethic, and vision have turned Ebby Holliday Realtors into the 10th largest independently owned real estate companies in the nation. Ebby is also well known as a respected community leader. Her active civic involvement and philanthropic efforts have inspired others to give back to those in need. Her name has become synonymous with ethics, class, and generosity. Over the course of her lifetime, Ebby has witnessed many historical events and changes in our fast-paced world, yet her love for family, friends, community, and this nation remains steadfast. I'm proud to call her my friend, and I know she will be surrounded by many of those today in Dallas, Texas, as she celebrates her 100th birthday. May she be blessed with many, many more years of health and happiness. Happy birthday, Ebby Holliday.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Maryland rise? Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to highlight the foreclosure crisis and recognize the thousands of distressed families in my district and across the country who continue to battle foreclosure. In Maryland, our foreclosures approached nearly 800,000 in the fourth quarter of 2010. This crisis hits particularly hard in my district, where we have about 40% of our foreclosures statewide. The foreclosure prevention and mitigation programs the Republican majority want to terminate this week have helped thousands of hardworking families to stay in homes and mitigated the effect of declining property values in neighborhoods across the country. Now, I know they're not perfect, but terminating these programs does not one single thing to spur the economy or protect middle-class families in need. In fact, the effect is quite the opposite. My colleagues claim that the programs haven't delivered on their promises. So what? What about the families who've benefited from the programs? What about the 1.2 million families that will face foreclosure this year? This is another case of trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Enough of that already. It's a simple question. Whose side are you on? Families workers, working families protecting their homes and communities, or are you on the side of the banks that want to take their homes? And with that, I yield.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island rise?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the creativity, effort, and resourcefulness of 2 local housing authorities in the 1st Congressional District of Rhode Island. At a time when Rhode Island and many other states across our country are experiencing unacceptably high foreclosure rates, there are some beacons of light in the housing sector. Beacons like the Town of Lincoln Housing Authority and the Housing Authority of the City of Providence, which are both being recognized by the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials as awards of merit winners for being well positioned to meet the demand for safe and affordable housing for low and very low income families. The Lincoln Housing Authority has instituted innovative programming for seniors, and the Providence Housing Authority has put in place energy efficiencies and cutting-edge health and fiscal planning programs. These housing authorities are leaders in the development and maintenance of cost-effective approaches to responding to the variety of today's housing and community development challenges. Lincoln and Providence housing authorities not only effectively address local housing and neighborhood redevelopment challenges and concerns, they've also set a national example for similar organizations to learn from so they can meet the unique needs in their communities. I congratulate you for your leadership in our state's housing industry, which proves yet again that Rhode Island innovation can combat both our state and national housing challenges. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from the Marianas Islands rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as we celebrate American Red Cross Month, I'd like to pay particular tribute to the Northern Mariana Islands chapter of the American Red Cross for the leading role it plays in responding to disasters, large and small, and in providing vital health and safety services in our islands. Our small community has been blessed since 1978 with an exceptionally active and effective local Red Cross chapter. With just 4 staff members and 150 volunteers, the Northern Mariana Islands chapter last year provided financial assistance to 26 families who suffered house fires or localized flooding, facilitated emergency communications between 154 service members and their families, provided community disaster preparedness materials to over 3,700 individuals, and trained over 2,300 students in courses on CPR, first aid, lifeguarding, and swimming. The Northern Mariana Islands chapter of the American Red Cross is an integral part of the Commonwealth community, a leader in health and safety, training, and an invaluable partner in helping people prevent, prepare for, and respond to emergencies. We thank them for your work.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask amendments to consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as the recent job report shows, our economy is steadily improving with 12 straight months of private sector job growth. Now, I state, now is the time for us to build on this progress and work together in a bipartisan effort to create jobs, not reduce jobs. I state, not to reduce jobs. But sadly, my Republican friends are letting the extremists dictate their agenda, protecting special interests at the expense of working families. The Republican budget would destroy 700,000 jobs and turn back the clock, I state, turn back the clock on a recent economic progress. This budget would do critical harm to American families. Mothers and children would be stripped of nutrition benefits from the WIC program. Thousands of youth would be kicked out of Head Start. And now the Republicans are ready to continue their assault on the middle class by terminating the mortgage relief program that keeps families in their homes. We should be helping families, not making them homeless. Let's work together to pass a budget that creates jobs and helps middle American. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the Republicans have been in control of this chamber for the last 10 weeks now, and we have taken 164 recorded votes, yet still have no plan to create jobs or spur economic growth. Instead of tackling unemployment, my Republican colleagues have now turned their efforts towards eliminating vital programs that are helping families deal with the fall of the mortgage crisis. 7 million families have lost their homes. with another 3 million foreclosures expected through 2012. And what is the Republicans' response to this crisis? They want to terminate programs designed to help homeowners keep their houses and avoid foreclosures. This week, they will bring a bill to the floor that would abolish a program that makes temporary loans to unemployed homeowners to help cover mortgage payments until they can find a job. Mr. Speaker, it is bad enough that they have no plan in sight to bring America back to work, but actually put energy towards ending programs that are helping the unemployed during difficult times is unacceptable. And I urge my colleagues to stop cutting programs that will keep American families in their homes and focus the legislation on creating jobs and move the economy forward. And I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, the Republican majority is indeed focused on jobs. In fact, their H.R. 1 would kill 700,000 jobs under the guise of fiscal responsibility. They'd cut transportation investments. They'd cut investments in education, student loans, and grants. They'd cut the COPS program, keeping our citizens safe with additional police on the street. They'd cut back on nutrition assistance to women, infant, and children. What's not on the table? Well, corporate welfare, $6 billion in ethanol subsidies. Whoop, don't want to touch that. $12 billion in agriculture subsidies for corporate farms. Heck, can't touch that. Tax loopholes for big oil while they're gouging us at the pump and not paying taxes in the United States of America. Can't put that on the table. But the Republicans have shown us their priorities, and even their friends in the Senate yesterday refused to take up their bill. And that's the way it is.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, sir. The majority has now been in power for 10 weeks and has yet to offer a plan for job creation. Instead, they've chosen to ignore the warnings of economists from across the political spectrum and are promoting a continuing resolution that threatens to derail and reverse our nation's recovery. Instead of slashing programs that are vital to job creation and economic growth, we need to carefully examine the budget and eliminate all wasteful spending. That is why I'm introducing the Surface Transportation Earmark Rescission Savings and Accountability Act of 2011, and I'd ask for bipartisan support on this. This legislation will reduce the deficit by $584 million by rescinding unspent funds authorized by federal transportation projects requested by members of Congress that date back to 1978. Instead of eliminating research at the National Institute of Health or eliminating funding to protect our air and water, let's focus on elimination of wasteful, unnecessary spending. I encourage you to work with me to include this language in the continuing resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii rise? Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we know that the economy is getting better. We know the job numbers are getting better. But we're still not there. We still have not addressed the cries of the people of this great nation. And we do know that essential to addressing the cries is a sense of public confidence. And tied to that public confidence is something that's essential to everyone, and that is feeling safe in your home, being able to provide for your families. And that is what two bills are about to address in this legislative body, two bills that should not pass. The attempts by the Republicans to defund two major programs that address what the people want and what the people need. One, of course, is the Federal Housing Administration's refinance program, and the other is the Emergency Homeowner Loan Program. That's for people who are without jobs through no fault of their own, either through unemployment or just simply medical conditions. 30,000 to 50,000 people were to be helped with that particular program. The other one is, of course, the underwater loan. 67% of homes in Nevada fall in that category, 25% in the nation. Mr. Speaker, let's concentrate on giving people public confidence and hope in the future. Thank you very much.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
1 minute. Revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today's message from the House Republicans is as follows. Quote, this House, and these are my quotes, by the way, this House will subsidize big oil and Wall Street, but our constituents who are losing their homes can just suck it up and find a bridge to sleep under. Just about every economist under the sun agrees that we won't have a robust job growth and recovery until foreclosures are under control. But rather than putting forth a proposal to improve the deeply flawed homeowner assistance programs, the GOP panders to its Wall Street base by proposing we do away with homeowner assistance altogether. I urge my colleagues to join me in rejecting this anti-homeowner, anti-middle-class proposal so we can turn to the serious work of improving homeowners assistance programs that are currently failing, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise? Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow, the House Homeland Security Committee will hold a hearing that will actually have the potential to make our nation less safe. The title of the hearing is "The Extent of Radicalization in the American Muslim Community." But what's truly radical is using committee time and resources to profile and demonize whole communities of people based on their faith. American Muslims are peaceful, law-abiding citizens, and many have cooperated with the U.S. authorities to help prevent terrorist attacks. We should target terrorists based on actions, not religion. When law enforcement agencies were asked to identify terrorist groups within their states, Muslim extremist groups ranked 11th out of 18. Neo-Nazis, environmental extremists, and anti-tax groups were all more prevalent. Radicalization and homegrown terrorism are serious and legitimate concern and deserve thoughtful examination, not an ideologically motivated charade. We must continue efforts to defeat al-Qaeda wherever they exist. But one key to combating extremism is winning the hearts and minds of the next generation of Muslims. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By the direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 151 and call for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 15, House Resolution 151, resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 836 to rescind the unobligated funding for the Emergency Mortgage Relief Program and to terminate the program. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Financial Services. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Financial Services now printed in the bill. Each section of the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those received for printing in the portion of the congressional record designated for that purpose in Clause 8 of Rule 18 in a daily issue dated March 9, 2011 or earlier, and accept pro forma amendments for the purpose of debate. Each amendment so received may be offered only by the member who caused it to be printed or a designee and shall be considered as read if printed. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. And a member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentlewoman, my friend from New York, Mrs. Slaughter, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
During consideration of this resolution, all time is yielded for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
House Resolution 151 provides for a modified open rule that allows any member to offer an amendment to the underlying bill as long as it is pre-printed in the congressional record and complies with House rules. This rule continues to build on the commitment of the Republican majority to consider legislation in a more open, honest, and thoughtful way. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying bill. This legislation was introduced by my dear friend, the chairman of the Republican Conference from Texas, Jeb Hensarling, on February the 28th, 2011, and marked up in the Financial Services Committee last week on March the 3rd. This legislation went through regular order, which included committee hearings prior to a markup and making the text of the legislation publicly available for members and the public to review prior to consideration in the committee on the House floor. Chairman of the Rules Committee, the gentleman from California, David Dreyer, has once again provided members of this body a transparent and accountable structure under which the rule we are debating and discussing today, allowing members of both sides of this aisle and of this body to offer amendments and to join in the debate of the underlying legislation. H.R. 836 repeals the Emergency Mortgage Relief Program and rescinds and permanently cancels all unobligated funds. It directs the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development to conduct a study to determine the extent of passage of the usage of the Emergency Mortgage Relief Program by covered homeowners, which includes members of the armed services, veterans, and Gold Star recipients. And lastly, it requires the Secretary to submit a report to Congress, including the results of that study and identifying any best practices that could be applied to the Emergency Mortgage Relief Program for covered homeowners. The Dodd-Frank Act established a $1 billion housing and urban development emergency homeowner relief program, which provides loans or credit advances to unemployed borrowers who cannot pay their mortgage to make mortgage payments for a period of 12 months with a possible extension. These loans increase the amount of the homeowner's indebtedness or the borrower's indebtedness so that a borrower who is unable to pay back either the original amount of principal or the additional loans made under the program would quite probably be worse off in the long run. These borrowers derive no benefit from the program, and the government will suffer the losses from their eventual defaults. That's the way the program was set up by the Democrat majority. Continued government intervention and questionable use of taxpayer dollars only prolongs our current economic crisis and ensures that the housing market will continue to struggle. The market needs to find its own footing, free of government intervention and manipulation, so that we can get on with a full recovery. The deficit is expected to reach a record $1,650 billion this year, while our national debt is well over $14 trillion and growing rapidly. As a matter of fact, growing so rapidly that last month, $230+ billion as a deficit for 1 month, the largest in the history of this nation, was recorded. Yet what do we hear out of the White House? Spend, 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 including against this bill that they have offered to veto because it would save some money. The U.S. simply cannot afford to loan billions of taxpayers' dollars that will not be repaid. The Obama administration, in its FY 2012 budget, proposal estimates that this program will have almost 98% subsidy rate. That means that for every dollar the government is expected up front to lose 98 cents. On every dollar of this program, the government right up front is expected to lose 98 cents. Mr. Speaker, no wonder Republicans are trying to go back and look at the programs, the massive spending programs, not only by President Obama and former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, but also the committee chairman and those who brought these measures to the floor that have had a stunning impact on the economy of this country. Also, HUD regulations set up a process where the bridge loan can be forgiven over a 5-year period. This is irresponsible. It is irresponsible not only now, it was irresponsible at the time it was passed by this House, passed by the Senate, and signed by the President. This is not a loan program, but another government welfare program. Job creation is the most effective foreclosure prevention tool. Job losses rather than unsustainable mortgage terms are now the driving force behind foreclosures and mortgage defaults. The government does not need to be adding additional debt obligations onto borrowers who are already struggling with their current commitments, particularly when doing so adds to the debt burden of every single American, including those who took out these loans who have to suffer through the process as they are seeing themselves use of a government program that provides not only more debt to the country, but tremendous strain on themselves. Government was not there to help. They were there to indebt the American people. Congress should focus on job creation, not welfare and giveaway programs. This is the best way to prevent more foreclosures and to get our economy back on track. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that enacting H.R. 836 would decrease federal budget deficits by $840 million over the 2011 to 2021 period. My colleagues on both sides of the aisle understand the current dire emergency that we're facing with the state of the U.S. economy and that American families are struggling. Why should the government go and make matters worse? It is our job as members of Congress and as legislatures to ensure that the policy which is passed by this House has integrity and can be backed up by the full measure of a free enterprise system instead of a government backstop. And it is that government backstop that Republicans objected to then and object to now. We need to make sure that our greatest days lie in our future, not the government handing out checks because the government didn't mind the blank check that it originally satisfied itself for in this legislation. We should be creating opportunities. We should not be holding back Americans from earning not only the opportunity for potential in their future, but also for making their life better. Eliminating this program will save taxpayers lots of money and encourage more responsible government spending by the federal government. Mr. Speaker, this was an unwise program. It proved in that way, and today Republicans are on the floor of the House of Representatives to say we can do the right thing today. So I encourage a yes vote on the rule and a yes vote on the underlying legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend and colleague for yielding this time to me, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlelady is recognized.
I certainly want to agree with my colleague, Mr. Sessions, that what the world is waiting for this Congress to do is to create jobs. We're approaching 100 days here without a single bill to do that, and we certainly look forward to that great day. Mr. Speaker, it was not that long ago that this country was facing the real possibility of another Great Depression. The financial crisis of 2008 was caused by reckless decision-making on Wall Street that had deep and painful impacts on hardworking Americans everywhere. As a result, millions of people lost everything. They lost jobs, retirement savings, and homes. All across America, families anguished over how to avoid homelessness, how to feed their families, how to keep them intact, how to keep their lives together for just one more day. 3 years later, we're starting to see the signs of a fragile recovery. However slowly, we have started to see modest private sector job growth over the past few months. However, we are far from where we need to be, and the troubled housing market remains in complete disarray. Millions of Americans are unemployed, still struggling to keep up with their mortgage payments. Millions more are saddled with mortgages worth more than their homes. Foreclosures swallowed up a whooping 1.2 million homes across the country in 2010, up from 900,000 in 2009, and despite the Republicans' apparent lack of concern for the ongoing foreclosure mess, many estimate the United States will eclipse previous yearly totals and foreclose on even more Americans in 2011. There's overwhelming evidence that everybody knows about that many of these foreclosures were faulty or downright illegal, and yet no accounting of this failure is demanded. But the people who lost their homes have lost it in major ways and have no recourse except some of these bills. These bills obviously need a lot of help. I couldn't agree more. They are not the best we could do. And yet, the sad thing to me is that once these 4 bills are done away with, there is no replacement, and we simply leave Americans to function as best they can. Now, if we're a nation that cares whether or not our neighbors are kicked out on the street, it's clear that we can't end these programs designed to lend a helping hand without something to replace them. The Emergency Homeowners Loan Program was created to help prevent foreclosures that are a result of massive financial hardships caused by unemployment and underemployment across the nation. Admittedly, some foreclosure prevention efforts in the past few years have not had as much success as we hoped, and we certainly have had very little cooperation from banks. They were simply asked to help, not required to. Democrats agree that the programs need improvement and would support a process to allow for bipartisan collaboration. So it's a shame that we stand here today ready to kill this program before it even gets off the ground or has a chance to help stem the tide of foreclosure. My colleagues on the other side are ready to end the program without offering any solution to what is clearly a continuing problem. But if we don't provide our constituents in need to provide them help, then who? It surely won't be the big banks foreclosing on our neighbors at record numbers. Just today, the New York Times reports that the CEO of Bank of America rejected the idea of reducing home loans for Americans in need. He thinks if he has to do it for one, he'll have to do it for all. What's fair about big banks reporting record profits by kicking homeowners out on the street? What's fair about banking executives walking away from their failed mortgage schemes without punishment, while thousands live in their cars or subsist in squalor, not fit for a global superpower? The audacity to call for a fair modification process after swindling millions of Americans with predatory mortgages and walking away with record profits as the house of cards collapsed is simply maddening. Yet we stand here today preparing to debate a bill that will tell American people that we just don't care. With so many homeowners still facing foreclosure, we should be focused on ways to improve programs designed to keep people in their homes. Many of these families are facing insurmountable odds on their own, but with just a little help, they may be able to make it through this tough time. But instead of reforming the program today, we are eliminating it. I would like to talk a little about the process. Today's rule is called a modified open rule, but this is not an open process. For starters, if the debate on the bill inspires an amendment, a member cannot offer it because it will not have been printed in time. Secondly, if the bill is changed by an amendment, members will not have the ability to respond to the changes. This limits the give and take of ideas that is the hallmark of dynamic and rigorous debate. But the biggest problem with this process is that members who want to reform the program rather than completely get rid of it, must find a germane offset, which is nearly impossible because the bill completely eliminates the program. In other words, any amendment to save any part of it would have to be offset by new money. We agree that reform is needed. Members have ideas for reform, alternatives to simply eliminating the existing program. Unfortunately, under this process, these alternatives cannot be offered. I urge my colleagues on the other side to work with us to improve these foreclosure programs, stem the foreclosure tide, and strengthen our middle class. This bill does not do that, and I urge my colleagues to vote no on today's rule and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By the way, we are working with all the members of Congress, and that's why we went through regular order, which was a new process for this House from the last 4 years. We also came to the Rules Committee and allowed an open process, and any member that chose to have an amendment to be offered today simply had to go and tell us ahead of time that they would like a pre-printing notice, and they could get that done. That is working together with every single member of Congress. Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield for such times as she may consume to the chairwoman of the Housing Committee of the Financial Services Committee, the gentlewoman, Mrs. Bicker.
The gentlelady from Illinois is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And, Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this rule, House Resolution 151 and House Resolution 150, the rule for H.R. 830. Last week, the Committee on Financial Services considered and approved two bills. H.R. 836, the Emergency Mortgage Relief Program Termination Act, and H.R. 830, the FHA Refinance Program Termination Act. H.R. 836 would terminate the Emergency Mortgage Relief Program and rescind any unobligated balances remaining under the program. The Emergency Mortgage Relief Program, created by the Dodd-Frank Act, establishes a $1 billion fund to provide loans or credit advances to borrowers who cannot pay their mortgages because of unemployment or reduction in income. To date, no funds have been provided to homeowners under this program, and serious questions remain about its cost, effectiveness, and benefits. The CBO estimates the program will have a 98% subsidy rate, meaning that for every dollar loaned under this program, 98 cents is not expected to be repaid. Given the country's current fiscal situation, no program warrants funding when benefits are speculative at best and substantial taxpayer losses are certain. The other bill approved by the Financial Services Committee, H.R. 830, which will be addressed by the rule in a little bit, H.R. 830, the FHA Refinance Program Termination Act, would rescind all unobligated balances made available for use under this program. More than $8 billion in TARP funds have been set aside for the FHA refinance program, and $50 million has been dispersed since September 2010. For this extraordinary investment of their money, taxpayers have thus far gotten very little return. The administration originally estimated this program would help between 500,000 and 1.5 million homeowners. However, only 44 loans have been refinanced and only 245 applications have been submitted. This program has been plagued by problems from the start. Borrowers are frustrated that few lenders participate in the program, and it is difficult for borrowers to even find out if their mortgage servicer has agreed to participate. Rather than continue to spend money we do not have on programs that do not work, Congress should focus on creating the certainty job creators need for economic activity and hiring. This means we must root out wasteful government spending on ineffective programs such as the FHA refinance program. What the American people want are jobs, not a handout or a program that doesn't work or is ineffective. I urge my colleagues to support the rules for H.R. 836 and H.R. 830 and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. And the gentlelady from New York. Judy.
I am pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 3 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend for yielding. I want to agree with Mr. Speaker, with the gentlelady from Illinois who just spoke, who said what the American people want is jobs. I agree with her. And when we assess the record of the new majority on this issue, I think we have to assess that it's found very wanting. This is the 10th week of the new majority. In 10 weeks, they've found a way to shut down women's health clinics by defunding Planned Parenthood. They found a way to essentially repeal 30 years' worth of protections for our drinking water and our air and our land. They found a way to pass a budget that cuts education, that saps strength and energy from our job creators in this country, but they haven't found one bill, 1 minute, one debate over a plan to work together to create jobs for the American people. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the American people want Republicans and Democrats to come together and figure out an environment that will encourage entrepreneurs and small businesses to create jobs for our country. The majority has frankly done everything but that. And today is yet another bill that I think is a wasted opportunity in that regard. I view today's debate through the eyes of 3 constituents I interacted with at home this weekend. One was a gentleman who runs a music distribution company. They produce CDs for people who have written and recorded music and don't have a label yet, so they can get their music out there to the rest of the world. He employs 500 people, and he wants to grow. And in order to grow, he needs people who are facile with various software and other technologies that will help his company grow. He depends upon graduates from our community colleges and our 4-year colleges and universities. And he didn't understand why the majority wants to cut the maximum college scholarship under Pell Grants by $845, thereby taking employees away conceivably from him by taking them out of school. It's the home builder that I met who really can't call himself a home builder anymore because he's not building any homes. And he wonders what we're doing to try to restore faith and confidence to the real estate market so that Americans will feel secure and confident enough to buy a home and put him and his workers back to work. He wonders what we're doing. It was the gentleman that I met yesterday who runs a biotech company that has 2 employees. And he depends on contracts from the National Institute of Health to do research on various pharmaceutical products. He wants to double the size of his company, put just 2 more people to work, but he won't hire them as long as the threat of a government shutdown is imminent. This is the wrong bill at the wrong time on the floor. What we should be doing is coming together, Republicans and Democrats, to cut spending. I would ask for an additional minute.
An additional 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady. To find ways to sensibly cut spending. Many of us on the floor, for instance, 2 weeks ago, voted to not send $1.5 billion to Iraq to fund their police department. Many of us voted not to spend a substantial amount of money to the Brazilian Cotton Institute. Many of us voted to say that if you make over $250,000 a year as a farmer, you shouldn't get a crop subsidy. These are areas that we agreed upon to reduce spending. Let's work to sensibly reduce spending, but let's not cut education and let's not undermine jobs. By all means, let's bring to the floor a bill that says to my friend that runs the music production company, we will help train the workers that you need. That says to my friend that wishes he were a home builder, we'll talk to these banks that have record amounts of money in their balance sheets and get them lending money again so people can buy a home. And says to our friend that's running the small biotech company, you don't have to worry that there's going to be gaping cuts in the research budget of the National Institute of Health. We're going to fund them, and they're going to continue to pay people to be the best and the brightest and find cures to diseases, and you can hire those 2 more people. 10 weeks. No jobs bill, no jobs plan, no cooperation to produce an environment where small business and entrepreneurs can put America back to work. Let's put aside our differences. Let's get to work on solving the real problems of our country. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from New York reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I'm shocked with our friend after friend on the Democratic side who say, no jobs bill. No jobs bill. But my friends also recognize what the American public does, that we voted literally the first vote in this House to overturn what is known as Obamacare, the massive government takeover of health care in this country that would net lose 800,000 jobs. Mr. Speaker, the Republican majority does have a jobs bill, and that is to go and rescind what the Democrats have outrageously done, and that is to put this country in a diminished position, not only with us being competitive overseas, but also for us diminishing American jobs. No, we're not going to go and do a, quote, jobs bill to add jobs. We're trying to simply go back and save the jobs that are being lost today and would be lost by wasteful government spending, huge government bureaucracies. And so my friends on the other side simply want to come and attack us. Well, the Republicans have it, and so the American people. We are going to stop the outrageous spending. We are going to attack the rules and regulations which are killing not only business, but losing jobs all across this country. We as Republicans are going to stand up and say, $4 gasoline is outrageous. Mr. President, work on the things from your administration that you are doing that ruin jobs, that make sure we have higher gas prices at the pump, and do those things that would help the American people. The Republican House majority is one half of one third of the body, and we are one third of government. We are trying to do the things that the American people sent us here for. We are all about trying to reduce wasteful government spending. We are going to take on the laws that have been passed by this president and the former two houses, sessions of Congress that were outrageous spending, tax increases, and assault on employers, and making it more difficult for the American people to have freedom and diminishing our future. So every time one of our Democrat friends goes and says, there's no jobs bill by the Republicans, the American people will get it. The Republicans first have to save the jobs that are at risk today. 800,000 net free enterprise system jobs that if we do not overturn Obamacare that was passed by this body on March the 22nd a year ago, we're going to lose even more jobs. So the most immediate thing we're doing is trying to reduce wasteful government spending, to try and do away with and attack rules and regulations that will kill the jobs that we have, and to make sure that we're telling the American people that this spending spree that we're on that causes a massive deficit, a hemorrhaging by this government, including last month, $230 billion we overspent, then we're doing our job. If we are doing those things, we're trying to save the jobs that we've got. And, Mr. Speaker, that is what the Republican majority is about. We're not going to let the Democrats get us off our game. We understand what they want. They want to talk about, well, we can look at doing back with some of the spending, but when it comes down to it, they can't pick anything they really will support. Everything is a sacred cow. Everything that we do is a problem if you go and touch it. Mr. Speaker, the Republican Party, the Republican majority led by Speaker Boehner and our Majority Leader Eric Cantor is all about trying to get back to America where we have a balance, to where we don't lose more jobs, where we don't add more debt, and we stand up for the American people. That's why we're the new majority party. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentlelady from New York.
To respond, I'm going to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
As for 2 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank Mr. Speaker. I thank my friend for yielding. I have great respect and affection for my friend from Texas. He's a valued member of this House and someone who cherishes his institutions and represents his constituents well. I would like to respond to two of the points that he's made. First, he makes reference to this 800,000 job loss as a result of the Health Care Act, there was a prediction made before the final version of the Act was put together very early in the process by a group that frankly is rather ideologically to his side of the aisle, that predicted that 800,000 jobs would be lost. In fact, most economists have argued that hundreds of thousands of jobs would be gained, but more importantly, Mr. Speaker, than predictions is reality. The health care law was signed into law almost a year ago, and I wonder if anyone on the majority side could tell us how many jobs the economy has lost in that year. I'd be happy to yield. Well, seeing no answer, the record, I'd be happy to yield to my friend. How many jobs has the economy lost since the health care bill was signed into law?
You know, you asked if somebody who knew the answer would stand up. I don't know the answer, but what I will tell you is that we will have the taxation start, and yet the plan kicks in 2014. So massive taxation will start, and then we'll find out what happens.
Reclaiming my time, and
we're still at almost 9%
reclaiming my
unemployment
time.
rate. So I don't see those millions of jobs.
Reclaiming my time.
Controls the time.
Yeah, reclaiming my time. The answer is that the economy has added over 1 million private sector jobs since the health care law was signed into effect. So predictions of great job loss have turned out not to be the case. Secondly, the gentleman made reference to the sort of great opposition to this law around the country. I frankly have not.
I will yield the gentleman another minute.
The gentleman is recognized for a minute.
I thank my friend for yielding. So the fact here is that despite this prediction of 800,000 jobs lost, in fact, the economy has gained more than 1 million private sector jobs since this happened. But I want to address one other thing that he said. He said that our goal is to, quote, knock the Republicans off their game. We do not think this is a game. We want to come to an agreement that would create an environment for small businesses and entrepreneurs to create jobs for the American people. He mentioned sacred cows. We don't think college scholarships are wasteful spending. We don't think that student loans are reckless spending. We don't think that reading teachers and math coaches for our neediest children is wasteful spending. We don't think that job training grants for people who've lost their job is wasteful. We think that cutting those programs wastes jobs in the private sector. That's why we oppose their reckless budget plan. That's why we beseech the majority. Let's get to work on putting Americans to work. I yield back.
The gentlelady reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, I stood up and openly said I have no clue how many jobs have been added. But the million job figure that the gentleman quotes is not a net figure. It's not a net figure. We have lost many, many, many times what we have gained. And the net figure means that when you add in what has been added versus what was lost, this country's in trouble. And I think the American people understand this. They understood it last November. They understand it now. People are scared. They're scared about their future. They're scared about their job. They're scared about how much gasoline's going to go up. They're scared about whether the EPA is going to come put some more rules and regulations on them. They're scared about what will happen in the long run with their job in health care. They see the diminishment of freedom. They see where we are in trouble, not only in our own homes, we're in trouble with our country. They see that we ran a $230 billion deficit last month alone. They see where this administration is incapable about looking at facts and factors and making a realistic choice about now that we understand what's happening, what are we going to do when we're in trouble. The Republican Party is here, and we are not going to be knocked off our game. We are going to go and try and save as many jobs as we can from the onerous rules and regulation, the excessive taxation, and perhaps worse of all, the inattention to try and create a better circumstance for this country. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go after, we're going to repeal this Obamacare, we're going to stay after the rules and regulations, and we're going to make sure that the middle class of this country has a chance to save the job that they have rather than diminishing it. You have seen, Mr. Speaker, all across this country, the states who are in the most trouble have top-to-bottom Democrat-controlled legislatures as well as Democrat governors. Those states are unwilling to make tough choices. They're unwilling to do the things which would say no to constituencies who are special interest. Today, the Republicans are on the floor of the House of Representatives, and we're saying not only no to special interest, but what we're trying to say is that we need to use common sense and balance. And I recognized 14 years ago when I came up here, common sense is not common in Washington. But today, part of that common sense takes place with, we're going to read the bills before we vote on them. We're going to go through regular order. We're going to relook at the things which have been passed, which diminish jobs and which harm our economy. And those are the things which we're on the floor to get done today. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of our Republican majority. I'm proud of our Speaker, who's from the great state of Ohio, who understands himself personally, because of the state where he's from, that the state of Ohio is in need of leadership, real leadership in Washington, D.C., just as the rest of the country. And so, the Republican Party stands on the floor of the House today. We are about jobs. We're about reducing wasteful Washington spending, and we're going to stand for common sense. We reserve our time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from New York.
I'd like to yield myself